Hi guys, welcome back to our reading corner, and we're going to get back into A Wrinkle in Time. The nails, I have to say the nails look so good with the book. Okay, so let's get our ginger ale first. The ever-present mug of ginger ale. Walk with me, turn out the lights. I hope you had a wonderful Saturday. I hope you got to relax, or if you were at work, that it was a good day at work. And I hope you're turning out your lights now with me and getting your ginger ale or whatever it is that you, something to drink. Cozy pillow, cozy blanket. Let's light our candle. Let's sit down and light our candle. Maybe we'll strike a few matches. Oh my goodness, where are my matches? I thought I had them up. Okay. There they are. So yes, be a wonderful Saturday, and that you're ready to relax in reading corner with me and get into A Wrinkle in Time. It really is a good little read. It's a good story. And it is kind of like in the same vein, I guess, maybe, as Alice in Wonderland, as far as it's, you know, in the realm of like a fantastical kind of story. But I got my fresh flowers today. Love to have, if I can, like if I can find a good price, pick some up for the house. It really makes the room nicer. I love flowers. Love, love, love. I'm sure you can tell. Okay, here we go. Let's read. Get your comfiest pillow and blanket. Come over to our cherry blossom tree. Oh, we can light dragonfly too. Let's strike one more match for dragonfly. I'm sorry, this is taking a long time to set up tonight. I hope you are enjoying it. I like to have you guys with me while I get ready. I feel like it's part of our process at this point. And it gives it more of like being read to kind of feel. I mean, at least when I was younger, there was a lot of kids in my family. My mom always had like a million things to do. I don't know how she did it, but she would read us stories, and when she did, it was like, it always felt like it took forever to get started, because she had to do this or that, or God bless her, she was always doing something wonderful. wonderful women. I'm very, very lucky. Very lucky. Let's get our pillow. Blanket. Sit in our reading chair. Soft, soft pillow. Lay down. Nice, soft, fluffy. It's velvety, actually. I love that part of the Cardi B ASMR, if anybody's ever seen that video. She has like a rug or a blanket. She's going soft, 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 fluffy, fluffy, fluffy. It's one of my favorite ASMR videos. Cardi B for W Magazine. If you haven't checked that out, it's absolutely amazing. Okay, here we go. I'm so sorry. I'll get to the point now. Get your blankets. Soft blankets. So soft. And our book, A Wrinkle in Time. And when we left off, we had met our characters, who was the main character is Megan. Isn't her name Megan? Am I crazy? Meg. Yeah, they call her Meg. So there's Meg and Charles Wallace, and then their brothers, Denny's and Denny's and Sandy. Pardon me. Denny's and Sandy, let me get some ginger ale, are the twins. And there's Meg's the oldest. I think you're the twins' oldest. I'm so sorry. So yes, we've got Fortinbras, their puppy, our half-grown or dog now. Fortinbras is the dog. They have a mom. Sandy's and Denny's are the twins, and then there's Meg, and Charles Wallace is the baby of the family, the youngest. And at this point, we just know that Meg's father isn't there. We don't know why yet. So sorry that recap was a bit clunky. Okay. And so we pick back up with Meg and Charles Wallace waking up from a storm in the middle of the night. And Meg went downstairs. Her room is in the attic to get something to drink. And Charles Wallace, who always had a way of knowing where she was already downstairs and heating up milk. And so they're in the kitchen in the middle of the night. And that's where we'll start. It's kind of in the middle of it. How did Charles Wallace always know about her? How could he always tell? He never knew or seemed to care what Denny's or Sandy were thinking. It was his mother's mind and Meg's that he probed with frightening accuracy. Was it because people were a little afraid of him that they whispered about the Murray's youngest child, who was rumored to be not quite bright? I've heard that clever people often have subnormal children, Meg once overheard. The two boys seemed to be nice, regular children, but oh my gosh, that unattractive girl and the baby boy certainly aren't all there. Goodness gracious. It was true that Charles Wallace seldom spoke when anybody was around, so that many people thought he'd never learn to talk. And it was true that he hadn't talked at all until he was almost 4. Meg would turn white with fury when people looked at him and clucked, shaking their heads sadly. "Don't worry about Charles Wallace, Meg," her father had once told her. Meg remembered it very clearly because it was shortly before he went away. "There's nothing the matter with his mind. He just does things in his own way and in his own time. I don't want him to grow up to be dumb like me," Meg had said. "Oh, my darling, you're not dumb," her father answered. "You're like Charles Wallace. Your development has to go at its own pace. It just doesn't happen to be the usual pace." "How do you know?" Meg had demanded. "How do you know I'm not dumb?" "Isn't it just because you love me?" "I love you, but that's not what tells me. Mother and I have given you a number of tests, you know." Yes, that was true. Meg had realized that some of the games her parents played with her were tests of some kind, and that there had been more for her and Charles Wallace than for the twins. "IQ tests, you mean?" "Yes, some of them." "Is my IQ okay?" "More than okay." "What is it?" "That I'm not going to tell you, but it assures me that both you and Charles Wallace will be able to do pretty much whatever you like when you grow up to yourselves. You just wait till Charles Wallace starts to talk. You'll see." How right he had been about that, though he himself had left before Charles Wallace began to speak, suddenly with none of the usual baby preliminaries, using entire sentences. How proud he would have been. "You'd better check the milk," Charles Wallace said to Meg now, his diction clear and cleaner. Pardon. Do this to the camera. His diction clearer and cleaner than that of most 5-year-olds. You know you don't like it when it gets the skin on top." "You put in more than twice enough milk." Meg peered into the saucepan. Charles Wallace nodded serenely. "I thought Mother might like some." "I might like some what?" a voice said, and there was their mother standing in the doorway. "Cocoa," Charles Wallace said. "Would you like a liverwurst and cream cheese sandwich? I'd be happy to make you one." "That would be lovely," Mrs. Murray said, "but I can make it myself if you're busy." "No trouble at all." Charles Wallace slid down from his chair and trotted over to the refrigerator, his pajamaed feet patting softly as a kitten's. "How about you, Meg?" he asked. "Sandwich?" "Yes, please," she said, "but not liverwurst. Do we have any tomatoes?" Charles Wallace peered into the crisper. "What? All right if I use it on Meg, Mother?" To what better use could it be put? Mrs. Murray smiled. "But not so loud, please, Charles. That is, unless you want the twins downstairs, too." "Let's be exclusive," Charles Wallace said. "That's my new word for the day. Impressive, isn't it?" "Prodigious," Mrs. Murray said. "Meg, come let me look at that bruise." Meg knelt at her mother's feet. The warmth and light of the kitchen had relaxed her so that the attic fears were gone. The cocoa steamed fragrantly in the saucepan. Geraniums bloomed on the windowsills, and there was a bouquet of tiny yellow chrysanthemums in the center of the table. The curtains, red with a blue and green geometrical pattern, were drawn, seemed to reflect their cheerfulness throughout the room. The furnace purred like a great sleepy animal. The lights glowed with steady radiance. Outside, alone in the dark, the wind still battered against the house, but the angry power that had frightened Meg while she was alone in the attic was subdued by the familiar comfort of the kitchen. Underneath Mrs. Murray's chair, Fortinbras let out a contented sigh. Mrs. Murray gently touched Meg's bruised cheek. Meg looked up at her mother, half in loving admiration, half sullen resentment. It was not an advantage to have a mother who was a scientist and a beauty as well. Mrs. Murray's flaming red hair, creamy skin, and violet eyes with long dark lashes seemed even more spectacular in comparison with Meg's outrageous plainness. Meg's hair had been passable as long as she wore it tidily in braids. When she went into high school, it was cut, and now she and her mother struggled with putting it up, but one side would come out curly and the other straight, so that she looked even plainer than before. "You don't know the meaning of moderation, do you, my darling?" Mrs. Murray asked. "A happy medium is something I wonder if you'll ever learn. That's a nasty bruise the Henderson boys gave you. By the way, shortly after you'd gone to bed, his mother called up to complain about how badly you'd hurt him. I told her that since he's a year older and at least 25 pounds heavier than you are, I thought I was the one who ought to be doing the complaining. But she seemed to think it was all your fault." "I suppose that depends on how you look at it," Meg said. "Usually, no matter what happens, people think it's all my fault, even if I have nothing to do with it at all. But I'm sorry I tried to fight him. It's just been an awful week, and I'm full of a bad feeling." Mrs. Murray stroked Meg's shaggy head. "Do you know why?" "I hate being an oddball," Meg said. "It's hard on Sandy and Denny's, too. I don't know if they're really like anybody else, or if they're just able to pretend they are. I try to pretend, but it isn't any help. You're much too straightforward to be able to pretend to be what you aren't," Mrs. Murray said. "I'm sorry, Meglet. Maybe if Father were here, he could help you, but I don't think I can do anything till you've managed to plow through some more time. Then things will be easier for you. But that isn't much help right now, is it? Maybe if I weren't so repulsive looking. Maybe if I were pretty like you." "Mother's not a bit pretty. She's beautiful," Charles Wallace announced, slicing liverwurst. "Therefore, I bet she was awful at your age." "How right you are," Mrs. Murray said. "Just give yourself time, Meg." "Lettuce on your sandwich, Mother?" Charles Wallace asked. "No, thanks." Does sound cozy in their kitchen. He cut the sandwich into sections, put it on a plate, and set it in front of his mother. "Yours will be along in just a minute, Meg. I think I'll talk to Mrs. Whatsit about you." "Who's Mrs. Whatsit?" Meg asked. "I think I want to be exclusive about her for a while," Charles Wallace said. "Onion salt?" "Yes, please." "What's Mrs. Whatsit stand for?" Mrs. Murray asked. "That's her name," Charles Wallace answered. "You know the old shingled house back in the woods that the kids won't go near because they say it's haunted? That's where they live." "They?" "Mrs. Whatsit and her two friends. I was out with Fortinbras a couple days ago. You and the twins were at school, Meg. We liked to walk in the woods, and suddenly he took off after a squirrel, and I took off after him, and we ended up by the haunted house, so I met them by accident, as you might say." "But nobody lives there," Meg said. "Mrs. Whatsit and her friends do. They're very enjoyable." "Why didn't you tell me about it before?" Mrs. Murray asked. "And you know you're not supposed to go off our property without permission, Charles." "I know," Charles said. "That's one reason I didn't tell you about it. I just rushed off after Fortinbras without thinking, and then as I decided, well, I'd better save them for an emergency anyhow." A fresh gust of wind took the house and shook it, and suddenly the rain began to lash against the windows. "I don't think I like this wind," Meg said nervously. "We'll lose some of the shingles off the roof, that's certain," Mrs. Murray said. "But this house stood for almost 200 years, and I think it will last a little longer, Meg. There's been many a high wind up on this hill." But this is a hurricane, Meg wailed. The radio kept saying it was a hurricane. It's October, Mrs. Murray told her. There have been storms in October before. As Charles Wallace gave Meg her sandwich, Fortinbras came out from under the table. He gave a long, low growl, and they could see the dark fur slowly rising on his back. Meg felt her own skin prickle. "What's wrong?" she asked anxiously. Fortinbras stared at the door that opened into Mrs. Murray's laboratory, which was in the old stone dairy right off the kitchen. Beyond the lab, a pantry led outdoors, though Mrs. Murray had done her best to train the family to come into the house through the garage door or the front door and not through her lab. But it was the lab door, not the garage door, towards which Fortinbras was growling. "You didn't leave any nasty-smelling chemicals cooking over a Bunsen burner, did you, Mother?" Charles Wallace asked. Mrs. Murray stood up. "No, but I think I'd better go see what's upsetting Fort anyhow." "It's the tramp. I'm sure it's the tramp," Meg said nervously. "What tramp?" Charles Wallace asked. "They were saying at the post office this afternoon that a tramp stole all Mrs. Buncombe's sheets." "We'd better sit on the pillowcases then," Mrs. Murray said lightly. "I don't think even a tramp would be out on a night like this, Meg." "But that's probably why he is out," Meg wailed, "trying to find a better place not to be out. In which case, I'll offer him the bar until morning." Mrs. Murray went briskly to the door. "I'll go with you." "Oh, I'll go with you." Meg's voice was shrill. I don't want to be too shrill for the purpose of ASMR. "No, Meg, you stay with Charles and eat your sandwich." "Eat?" Meg exclaimed as Mrs. Murray went out through the lab. "How does she expect me to eat?" "Mother can take care of herself," Charles said. "Physically, that is." But he sat in his father's chair at the table and kicked his legs at the rungs. And Charles Wallace, unlike most small children, had the ability to sit still. After a few moments that seemed like forever to Meg, Mrs. Murray came back in, holding the door open for her. Was it the tramp? It seemed small for Meg's idea of a tramp. The age or sex was impossible to tell, for it was completely bundled up in clothes. Several scarves of all assorted colors were tied about the head, and a man's felt hat perched atop. A shocking pink stole was knotted about a rough overcoat, and black rubber boots covered the feet. "Mrs. Whatsit," Charles said suspiciously. "What are you doing here? And at this time of night, too?" "Now, don't you be worried, my honey." A voice emerged from among the turned-up coat collar, stole, scarves, and hat. A voice like an oiled gate, but somehow not unpleasant. "Mrs. Whatsit says she lost her way," Mrs. Murray said. "Would you care for some hot chocolate, Mrs. Whatsit?" Charmed, I'm sure," Mrs. Whatsit answered, taking off the hat and the stole. "It isn't so much that I lost my way as that I got blown off course. And when I realized I was at little Charles Wallace's house, I thought I'd just come in and rest a bit before proceeding on my way." "How did you know this was Charles Wallace's house?" Meg asked. "By the smell." Mrs. Whatsit untied a blue and green paisley scarf, a red and yellow flowered print, a gold Liberty print, a red and black bandana. Under all this, a sparse quantity of grayish hair was tied in a small but tidy knot atop her head. Her eyes were bright, her nose a round, soft blob, and her mouth puckered like an autumn apple. "My, but it's lovely and warm in here," she said. "Do sit down." Mrs. Murray indicated a chair. "Would you like a sandwich, Mrs. Whatsit? I've had liverwurst and cream cheese. Charles has had bread and jam. And Meg, lettuce and tomato. Now let me see, Mrs. Whatsit pondered. I'm passionately fond of Russian caviar. You peaked, Charles cried indignantly. We're saving that for Mother's birthday, and you can't have any. Mrs. Whatsit gave a deep and pathetic sigh. No, Charles said. Now you mustn't give in to her mother, or I shall be very angry. How about tuna fish salad? All right, Mrs. Whatsit said meekly. I'll fix it, Meg offered, going to the pantry for a can of tuna fish. For crying out loud, she thought, this old woman comes barging in on us in the middle of the night, and Mother takes it as though there weren't anything peculiar about it at all. I bet she is the tramp. I'll bet she did steal those sheets, and she's certainly no one Charles Wallace ought to be friends with, especially when he won't even talk to ordinary people. I've only been in the neighborhood a short time, Mrs. Whatsit was saying, as Meg switched off the pantry light and came back into the kitchen with the tuna fish. And I didn't think I was going to like the neighbors at all until dear little Charles came over with his dog. Mrs. Whatsit, Charles Wallace demanded severely, why did you take Mrs. Buncombe's sheets? Well, I needed them, Charles dear. You must return them at once. But Charles dear, I can't. I've used them. It was very wrong of you, Charles Wallace scolded. If you needed sheets that badly, you should have asked me. Mrs. Whatsit shook her head and clucked. You can't spare any sheets. Mrs. Buncombe can. Meg cut up some celery and mixed it in with the tuna. After a moment's hesitation, she opened the refrigerator door and brought out a jar of little sweet pickles. Though why I'm doing it for her, I don't know, she thought, as she cut them up. I don't trust her one bit. Tell your sister that I'm all right, Mrs. Whatsit said to Charles. Tell her my intentions are good. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, Charles intoned. My, but isn't he cunning, Mrs. Whatsit beamed at him fondly. It's lucky that he has someone to understand him. But I'm afraid he doesn't, Mrs. Murray said. None of us is quite up to Charles. But at least you aren't trying to squash him down, Mrs. Whatsit nodded her head vigorously. You're letting him be himself. Here's your sandwich, Meg said, bringing it to Mrs. Whatsit. Do you mind if I take off my boots before I eat? Mrs. Whatsit asked, picking up the sandwich nevertheless. Listen. She moved her feet up and down in her boots, and they could hear water squelching. My toes are ever so damp. The trouble is these boots are a mite too tight for me, and I never can take them off by myself. I'll help you, Charles offered. Not you. You're not strong enough. I'll help. Mrs. Murray squatted at Mrs. Whatsit's feet, yanking on one slick boot. When the boot came off, it came suddenly. Mrs. Murray sat down with a thump. Mrs. Whatsit went tumbling backward with the chair into the floor, sandwich held high in one old claw. Water poured out of the boot and ran over the floor and the big braided rug. Oh, dearie me, Mrs. Whatsit said, lying on her back in the overturned chair, feet in the air, one in a red and white striped sock, the other still booted. Mrs. Murray got to her feet. Are you all right, Mrs. Whatsit? If you have some liniment, I'll put it on my dignity. I'll put it on my dignity. That's what I thought. If you have some liniment, I'll put it on my dignity, Mrs. Whatsit said, still supine. I think it's sprained. A little oil of cloves mixed well with garlic is rather good. And she took a large bite of the sandwich. Do please get up, Charles said. I don't like to see you lying there that way. You're carrying things too far. Have you ever tried to get to your feet with a sprained dignity? Excuse me. But Mrs. Whatsit scrambled up, righted the chair, and then sat back down on the floor, booted foot stuck out in front of her, and took another bite. She moved with great agility for such an old woman, At least Meg was reasonably sure that she was an old woman, and a very old woman at that. Mrs. Whatsit, her mouth full, ordered Mrs. Murray, "Now pull while I'm already down," quite calmly, as though this old woman and her boots were nothing out of the ordinary. Mrs. Murray pulled until the second boot relinquished the foot. This foot was covered with a blue and gray argyle sock, and Mrs. Whatsit sat there, wriggling her toes, contentedly finishing her sandwich before scrambling to her feet. "Ah," she said, "that's ever so much better," and took both boots and shook them out over the sink. "My stomach is full, and I'm warm inside and out, and it's time I went home." "Don't you think you'd better stay till morning?" Mrs. Murray asked. "Oh, thank you, dearie, but there's so much to do. I just can't waste time sitting around frivoling. It's much too wild a night to travel in." "Wild nights are my glory," Mrs. Whatsit said. "I just got caught in a downdraft and blown off course." "Well, at least till your socks are dry. Wet socks don't bother me. I just don't like the water squishing around my boots. Now don't worry about me, Lamb." Lamb was not a word one would ordinarily think of calling Mrs. Murray. "I shall just sit down for a moment and pop on my boots, and then I'll be on my way. Speaking of ways, Pet, by the way, there is such a thing as a tesseract." Mrs. Murray went very white, with one hand reached backward and clutched at the chair for support. Her voice trembled. "What did you say?" Mrs. Whatsit tugged at her second boot. "I said," she grunted, shoving her foot down in it, "that there is, shove, such a thing, shove, as a tesseract." Her foot went down into the boot, and grabbing shawls, scarves, and a hat, she hustled out the door. Mrs. Murray stayed very still, making no move to help the old woman. As the door opened, Fortinbras streaked in, panting, wet and shining as a seal. He looked at Mrs. Murray and whined. The door slammed. "Mother, what's the matter?" Meg cried. "What did she say? What is it?" "The tesseract," Mrs. Murray whispered. What did she mean? How could she have known? And that is where we will stop. My Shining Stars. That's the first chapter of Wrinkle in Time. It's such a good book. Yeah, I'll probably do full chapters of this one. Maybe, depending on how long we are, we'll do more than one chapter a night. I could keep reading, but I think it's time for us to go to sleep. Go to sleep. Go to sleep. Are you sleepy yet? So chapter 2, tomorrow night, Mrs. Who. Chapter 2 will be Mrs. Who tomorrow night. It has the general appearance of being science fiction, but it's not. There is mystery, mysticism, a feeling of indefinable brooding horror. The pervading theme is love. One feels that this book quests desperately for something it never touches. It is original, different, and exciting. The Saturday Review. Fascinating, it makes unusual demands on the imagination and consequently gives great rewards. Horn book. And characterization is excellent. The enormity of the setting is handled with sensitivity and suspense as well as sustained. Provocative reading for discerning teenagers. Library Journal. It's a good little book. Alright, guys. I hope everybody has a lovely evening, or has had a lovely evening and is now sufficiently relaxed and ready to go to sleep. And I pray that you all have solid sleep and wonderful dreams. And I can't wait to see you back here tomorrow, back in the reading corner, for our next chapter of Wrinkle in Time. In Jesus' name, I pray, amen. Thank you, God.